Hello, lovely listener, and welcome to the Aardvark Swift podcast. I'm James Bowers, and I'm part of the marketing team here at Aardvark Swift. Throughout this series, we'll be speaking to game studios, initiatives, and industry professionals about all things video games, from tips on recruitment and how to get into this career path, to studio cultures and projects to get involved in. This month, it's our amazing guest host, Abby Dickinson again, speaking with Harinder Sangha and Chris Southall of Sumo Leamington, a purely mobile-focused developer within the Sumo digital family. They discuss the importance of autonomy, mobile gaming models, and founding a fledgling indie-esque development house. This episode was originally recorded in September of 2019.
Do you want to explain a little bit about the studio, when you set up, what you've been doing so far, what's the plans for the future, just like a rough overview?
So yeah, I can talk a little bit about what led us to starting Sumo Leamington. You know, I've been working with Sumo for many years now. You know, going right back to when Sumo started, in 2003. You know, I was at Codemasters at that point, and we were doing some work with Sumo. So it came to pass. You know, I've been at Sangha for the last 15 years and wanted to go and do something else. And really, it was very attractive to come to Sumo, knowing the guys and the culture at Sumo so well, knowing what a great company it is. Because I'm based in Leamington and Sumo wanted to set up more studios, the discussion was let's set something up in Leamington because it's a great area to have a game developer in, which I'm sure we can talk about at length later. And really it made sense as well to focus on mobile, because that's not something that Sumo has done historically. It's released some content on iOS and Android, but not done full mobile development and offered that as a service. And as I've been working on mobile with Sangha for the last 7 years, it made a lot of sense to focus on mobile and add that to Sumo's portfolio, basically. It's been nice to see the group that's been forming, and there's a lot of stuff going on, so it's quite an exciting time for the studio.
To see them all starting to work together and see how they've all started to bond, and just playing board games at lunchtime. It's actually, I feel quite proud of how they've all come together.
Those folks out there are working on our first projects as well, which I can't really talk about, but it's exciting stuff, so it's nice to see it coming together. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have a sort of day-to-day when it comes to being studio director?
Yeah, well, I think day-to-day changes. There's a lot of planning and strategic stuff, and just really thinking about how we can set things out to form the best culture as people do come in. I think we've got very clear ideas on how we want studios to work, having built studios in the past, and enjoyed doing that. But really now it's switching a little bit more to operational stuff as well as that strategic side. And really with my role as well, there's a lot of interaction with both the other studios, working with the central office in Sheffield, but also going out and speaking to potential partners and clients and that side of things. It depends on what phase you're in, but really, it's very important. What Sumo's superpower really is, it's such a great partner to work with, and so forming those relationships and making sure we're speaking to clients is an important part of what I'm doing as well. Yeah,
very much so. I imagine it's quite good to see, because obviously the studio's dotted around the whole country now, pretty much, isn't it? It's not one in Scotland, is there?
There is not Sumo Scotland, no. But actually, if you look
soon, that's next.
Who knows? But the Sumo office is now sort of up and down the country. I think it's a nice group to be in, and all of the other guys in the other studios are all great people, and it's just a nice environment to be working in. A very sort of positive time, I think, for Sumo.
Good, excellent. Yeah. That's always nice to hear. The other question I definitely want to ask both of you as well is, we all know there's no sort of perfect formula to how to get into the games industry. There's no step-by-step that everybody follows. So how did you get into the games industry?
How did I get into the games industry? So I went to Bristol University. I was doing maths and computer science. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do after university. I originally wanted to be an architect before I went to university, but the course was going to be too long, I felt, at 19, so I went and did maths instead, and that changed into maths and computer science. And simply, the guys at Codemasters, I think, were quite interesting in how they recruited at the time, and I was looking at the milk rounds and thinking, I had a job offer from IBM, KPMG, but then I saw an advert in the Financial Times for Codemasters, and I'd played Micro Machines when I was sitting around supposed to be working at university. And I was like, I'll go and see those guys. And compared to KPMG or somewhere like IBM, you rock up to this sort of small farmhouse in the countryside in the Midlands, and there's these two sort of 30-year-old people who run the company. That was Richard and David Darley. It was just a very sort of inspiring place to go and see how much more fun it was going to be to go into the games industry versus, I mean, this is just me, but people may have different opinions, but it just seemed a lot more exciting to do that rather than go and work in IBM or something like that. So yeah, I ended up getting the job that was there for Codemasters, which was sort of early phases of design of 2 games. One was called Common Cray Rally, the other one was Toca touring cars. So I ended up working on those, and that's where I started and what's sort of led me to where I am today.
No, that's amazing. I loved Colin McRae Rally when I was a kid.
Good answer.
I loved it. It was Colin McRae Rally and Micro Machines are 2 of the ones I got on my PlayStation 1, like way back in the day.
So
when we were playing them.
The PlayStation 1 version of Micro Machines was the first game I worked on proper.
Really?
And it was because I came in and I was doing design and engineering really. I was supposed to be working on the car physics for what became Colin and Toca. But we didn't have that many dev kits at Codemasters at the time, so we were doing levels for Micro Machines V3. And because they didn't have many dev kits, they were getting people to maybe work in the evenings, sort of split shift.
Wow.
And was anyone up for doing that? I was like, yeah, brilliant. I don't care. I'll sort of start at 4 p.m. and finish at 11 or midnight or whatever it was. And I built some of the levels for Micro Machines.
That's amazing.
My friends still mention it to me because maybe I wasn't washing as much as I should have been at the time, but one of the later levels, when you unlock it, it's not open for the beginning of the game, as I recall. It's been a long time since, but I think it's the school desk levels. And on one of the desks in the school, it says Stinky Chris. And that was Adam, one of the artists. That was his reference for me. He kind of put that in. So in honour of me, maybe that's the thing I should say.
Oh yeah, you should definitely say that. I actually went and played it recently at the National Video Game Museum, in Sheffield. Yeah. I went and popped in there. Me and my boyfriend went on the weekend. They have Micro Machines set up, and I was like, I love this game. I went and set it up. It is solid. Yeah. It is so difficult really to play now because obviously I was so used to the controls when I was younger, and I haven't played it in that many years. And racing games have changed so much. Yeah. I tried playing it, fell off the table like 15 times.
Yeah. Everything was always a lot more hardcore. You had to spend time, didn't you?
You really had to spend time with it. The controls are they feel almost foreign now, but I remember loving it, absolutely loving it.
Yeah, so Micro Machines is basically why I'm in the games industry, because had I not been playing that at uni, I probably wouldn't have applied to that Codemasters ad. So there you go.
No way. What do you think you'd be doing if you weren't in the games industry?
I'd like to say architecture, but subsequently, I don't know. I've always just been interested in product design and making, products and what is good and bad about, user experience and products. So something in that engineering and product design area, I reckon.
Yeah, but gaming's better.
Sort of gaming definitely scratches that itch for me because there's so much product design in there, and it's such a sort of fast-moving, creative, and the technology side has always been attractive to me as well. So yeah, it's a great combination.
Very cool. Okay, Harinder, how did you get into the games industry?
So I was 30 when I joined the games industry, so a little bit later I joined. So my background is, I'm an accountant by profession. I've worked in lots of different industries, construction, financial services and advertising. I was actually working in a financial services software house at the time, and I'd been there for 7 years and I'd just been doing pure finance, so I just wanted to do something a little bit different. And I got approached at the time by a headhunter who was looking for somebody to come and be the operations manager at the Sangha racing studio. And at the time I thought, wow, Sangha, are they still going? That's my first thought actually, because I wasn't really a gamer at all, and I just thought, it sounded like a kind of interesting role. So I went for the interview. I do remember very much the first time I walked into the racing studio, and it's so different from working in any other industry, from being in somewhere that everybody wears suits to work. And it's very corporate. Then walking into the racing studio, where to the left, just remember, one of these designers had he had obviously 2 screens on his desk. He had a TV, he had Xbox, PlayStation. He had his feet on the desk, sat back in his chair, right back in his chair, playing. It was Paul Coleman actually. I just remember that. Really, yeah. I just thought, what is this? I just remember thinking, this is really weird. This is really weird. And in front of me, there's obviously a load of the rally pods that were just lined up, and I just thought, this is really. I've never walked into anywhere like this before. And my first interview was with Chris. He's the first person I met in the industry.
Wow.
And I just, it was so different from anything that I'd experienced before. I just thought, this is this is quite good fun. This seems all right. I think I could
And
come and do this.
And you actually decided to join. So that's remarkable.
Exactly. Yeah.
It must have been such a big change from like financial. I mean, because it's just so suited and booted, and then you come into somewhere that's so relaxed. It must have been such a. It must have been a bit of a culture shock. Actually,
It was a massive culture shock. I remember the first day thinking it must have spent hours deciding, putting a pair of jeans on to work and thinking, well, this is wrong. This is wrong. I don't wear jeans to work. But yeah, it was really weird. But just very quickly, you get to know the people, and it's really nice to work with people that are so passionate about what they do, and they come to work because this is their hobby. And so quickly when you start to work with people like that, rather than it feeling like a job, I think you just feed off that.
What would you say is your career highlight to date?
I saw that question, when you sent over some sort of pre-warming questions, and I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
Because I've just enjoyed most of the stuff that I've been working on. We talked earlier about things like Micro Machines. That was really cool. First game I worked on was a really successful game. The Collins series was very successful, so it's just really nice to have that experience of releasing a game and bumping into people randomly, going travelling or whatever else, and they were fans of the game that you've made. That's just really cool. And yeah, I think I've just been fortunate to work on a lot of really nice games over the years. You say, came to Sega in 2000. When was it? 2004, 2005, and really cool experiences there. Going over to Japan, being able to work, with Sonic Team in their office in Japan, doing a bit of work with Platinum Games. I've just been very fortunate, I think, to work on loads of cool stuff.
I think that's
a bit of a broad answer, but I can't.
I think that's a better answer. I think just being able to say my whole career has been a highlight.
Yeah.
Happy face. I like it. Have you got one, Harinder?
I suppose one of the highlights for me was when I was still at Sega, being asked to be the studio head when Chris left, being the only female for Sega Europe to run a studio. Wow. So that's a big highlight. But also just being given the opportunity to come here and, based on what we've done before, being entrusted to do it again, really. So that's a big badge of honour, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, you did a good job. Well done. Here's
exactly.
Yeah, that's good.
No, it works out really well. Okay, so if you're going to pick a favourite project that you've worked on, I've had people say it's the one I'm working on now and I can't tell you, so that's completely fine.
Favourite project? See, I think that's similar to the question on, what's been your highlight of your career so far?
You just plug your career. It's been like, I worked on this and this and this and this.
Yeah, that's it. What would you say to that, H? I just passed the buck while I was just thinking.
Do you know what? Actually, this might be a little bit of a cop-out answer, but because I'm less involved with the projects, it's not really about the games that I've made for us. For me personally, I think it's about everything else around it and actually putting those project teams together in the first place and seeing how they've worked and being proud of them more than the actual product itself.
No, I think that's a really good answer.
So,
yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. Beyond saying you love the people on the projects and setting up those
not
teams.
All of them, but most of them. Yeah,
you love the team as a whole, and not the individual people.
Just seeing how, building them and putting them together and seeing how they're all working. I think that's
If I were to pick 2 favourite projects, am I allowed that?
You can pick 17 favourites if you want to.
Oh, don't give him more.
I've been around for quite a long time, so the first Colin game that we built was great, and that feeds into a lot of what my belief is in forming good teams now, because really there weren't many of us who'd done a game before, a full game end to end. There was maybe 2 people in the team who'd built a game, and we were mostly graduates, and it was really sort of amazing to see this bunch of graduates, obviously guided by some of the senior people at Codemasters. Learnt a lot from Richard Darling, but then to see that game released, and there was a lot of hard work on that game and a lot of learning, to see it make number 1 and be very successful was amazing. Another game I really enjoyed working on, although I wasn't working on it full time, and this is a bit of a mouthful, let me try and get it right. It's Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. I think that's the name. So that's the first karting game that Sumo built, working with Sega. And obviously I was at Sega at the time, and spent a lot of time collaborating and working up in Sheffield with the guys on that team. And that was a nice game to work on, and I really enjoyed my time working with Sumo. So that may be why I'm doing this with Sumo now. Yeah. So that's good. I'm going to pick 3, aren't I? Rather than 2.
Just keep talking about your career.
Yeah.
It's all fine, this works for a podcast.
Yeah, and then, I did loads of different stuff with Sega, but really, let's say, just over 7 years ago, was given the opportunity to form a full development studio working on mobile, The first thing we did there really was Sonic Dash, and that game, quick prototype, what would it make sense on mobile for Sonic to be doing? There's infinite runners out there. We kind of put two and two together and made that game pretty quickly, and we've been seeing it downloaded ever since. And I think we released that game in 2013 and it's still running now, and it's got such a massive audience and massive downloads over the years. So that's pretty cool to see that.
That must be cool to be able to see people are still enjoying it as well, even that many years on.
Do you know what? I've got children, and my kids were playing it when they were 5 and 6, and there's they're playing things like Unturned and BeamNG and sort of hardcore PC stuff now because they're sort of 12 and 14. You sort of see people growing up with these things, and I think that's one of the amazing things you see about the modern games market. Not just mobile but other platforms as well. These games are sort of hobbies, and people are playing with them and existing with these games for years. So 5-year-olds playing Sonic Dash when it came out. Well, I can't do the maths right now, but are much older now, and there's different cohorts of people are still enjoying that game, year after year. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think that's the great thing about mobile games, especially, is it can be made to be really, really accessible. Yeah. And so anyone from the ages of 5 to 85 can play that game if they really wanted to. And I think that's some of the beauty and especially some of the simpler mobile games. I think it could be really cool.
Yeah, and when we're thinking about design for mobile, I sort of like to say the way we think about the game design is people are going to be interacting with the projects that we're making, the games we're making, more like hobbies than just things to pick up and throw away. People maybe don't play that many different games on mobile. Okay, for the hyper casual stuff, people sort of pick it up and forget it after a little while and churn out pretty quickly. But the kind of stuff we're interested in are games where they have social elements and there's multiplayer in there, and they're things that you can be existing with for years. And so it's interesting to think about them more as hobbies than just kind of throwaway bits of entertainment. I think it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think that's probably a way you have to kind of like reframe your mind, especially if you've been working on different sort of game types in the past. Mm-hmm. When you're looking at them as those sort of hobbies and things that people are going to pick up again and again and again instead of like finishing a narrative and putting it down. So it's just a different way of kind of framing your thinking about gaming.
Yeah, I mean, coming from making console games and then working on mobile for quite a long time, and me and some of our colleagues have worked on a few different genres. We talked about Sonic Dash, which is an infinite runner, but we were working on MMOs as well with quite a hardcore audience in there, and really the mindset to build games which are communities existing with you for many years versus something that as it used to be, so you stuck it on a DVD and after 3 months the sales spike and then they took the tail off. Yeah. And people play the game to the end and then maybe come back to it if they're a completionist, but really wouldn't. Whereas the actual mindset and the design ethos and the way of thinking, one of our values is to really think about the communities players that are existing with our games. On the face of it, it might not seem like a massively different mindset, but really it is. The devil is in the detail on making games, like making anything really, anything creative, or any product really. So yeah, it takes a lot of understanding in various areas to sort of think of how to build these games in such a way that they work. So yeah it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think I've been chatting to a lot of community managers and stuff recently as well, where they were saying like their sort of roles didn't exist kind of 5-6 years ago. Yeah. Whereas now obviously people have started to realise that you're talking to your fans, and especially for these sort of like hobbyist games that are going to be around for a long time, you want to foster that community. Mm-hmm. And so there's almost like a new sort of career that's kind of come out of that, with people having to talk to communities, find out their feedback, feeding that into the dev cycle, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because the layout of the studio, for these kind of games is different. As you say, having community ideally working side by side with the engineers and the artists and the designers is really important. You have product managers, you have data analysts who are really looking at, with a design hat on, how the community is working with the game. Making sure that the development team as a whole, the engineers and the artists and everyone else, they're thinking about, okay, we're building this game, but how's it going to work when we have a community there, and how are we going to react and actually work with the community to continue building the game after it launches. And sort of technology-wise and process-wise, you need to do some stuff to enable games to be updated frequently, and running things like events, that kind of stuff. But also just a mindset where we're not designing the game for ourselves. we're designing the game for the community of people, and that's a bit of a different mindset than you would take maybe on other games. And so you end up having lots of different roles. Going back to my example where I worked on games on PlayStation 1, the team layout is much more diverse because there's a lot more things that you need to be doing well in order to actually make these games work well for a community. So it's all the future, but it's nice to be in the future because I play these games myself where I'm sitting with people in my clans that I've maybe not met in real life, although some of them I know in real life. We've sort of been hanging out for years now, and I think it's great. It's really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah,
completely agree.
Well, obviously you're here because you clearly are interested in games.
Oh, I'm so interested in games. Me and my boyfriend are massive nerds. We have 2 TVs set up in our living room with every console underneath both of them.
You're not the first person I have met who has that set up with their partners.
I think it's the coolest. It's like I was sat there, it's like I've got so many mates who like either one of them are gamers and the other one isn't or whatever, and I was like, 2 TVs, it's the future. I was like, you just need both.
Yeah, this guy goes to work with Scott and his wife George. Yeah, they were the first dual TV setup people that I knew, and that was 15, 20 years ago now. But I'm just thinking, I'm going through the list of names of people I know who have exactly that kind of. That's great. Yeah.
I've got all of them, so we're a little bit obsessed. If you were to do another role within the studio, it doesn't have to be anything that you're actually good at. Just think something that you think is cool. What do you think you'd do?
Good question. This is one of those where I've been thinking about it. I really just don't know the answer.
No.
What I would say is it would be something where I can actually just focus and create stuff. I mean, Joe, who's the art director here, would hate me saying this, but I quite fancy actually learning how to do Photoshop and doing some art tasks. I very rarely get to focus on one thing for more than about 20 seconds at a time. And actually it's quite appealing to me to do something where I can spend an hour, even more than that, just sort of creating one thing. And I was quite, I did art all the way through to A-level, and I wanted to be an architect at that point in my life when I was doing A-levels and didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I believe myself that I'm quite good at drawing. I'm probably not, but yeah.
I'd have ask our art direction where
or just get you to draw something just on the spot. It's like, here's a pen, go.
Yeah, so...
That'll be the bit we'll have to edit out.
Yeah.
Because he won't be happy with that.
I would like to be a trainee artist.
Yes, trainee artist, cool.
Yeah. Do you know, I'd like to do some of the data analytics stuff.
Really?
Because I think all of anything to do with data is just fascinating. Pulling all that information. Yeah, I think that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. I like that. I'm a bit of a brand nerd, so I do like marketing and stuff, so I'm the person who does like all the Google Analytics deep dives, so I get that. Yeah. I get liking the data and proving the stuff works, and it's like, here, look how well I did.
Yeah, that's good, isn't it?
That. Yeah. Talking about the studio in general, going on to Sumo Leamington. So what are you guys doing that isn't being done at the other studios? I know obviously it's mobile focused. Yeah. Is that the main difference?
Yeah, I think it is a big difference being 100% mobile focused. There's lots of similarities, but the makeup of the team is slightly different for essentially what are service-based games, I would say. Rather than just mobile, it's more service-based games. And we're obviously looking at free-to-play games a lot as well. That is a difference. In terms of other differences, I think there are differences. The attitude really with Sumo in general, Sheffield being the oldest and biggest, but it's not a cookie-cutter approach. We're not trying to just replicate what happens in Sheffield with all the other studios. I think it's important, for the business as a whole. All of the studios have their own way of working and make things work and make the culture, work for each studio because we're all focused slightly differently. So I don't know specifically what I would call out as we're doing differently because we're not trying to be different for the sake of it, but there are obviously differences. For us, we're focusing first on things like the vision and the culture within the studio and making sure that every person we're hiring is the right person. We're not looking for cookie cutter people. Diversity is very important for us, and making sure that there's different voices within the studio, but people are all interested in working for our communities of players and being collaborative and trying to improve themselves and what we're doing. These are all important things. That's the kind of stuff that I feel is important at that stage. Whether it's doing things differently from the other Sumo studios is probably not, and Sumo as a whole is really focused on its people. One of the reasons I work at Sumo, having worked at various other places in the past, is that I know that the culture's good and they're really interested in making sure that the people are front and centre and the most important part of the business. So I'm probably rambling now, but
that's totally fine.
Yeah, doing your trick, rambling. How are we different? I'm not going to answer that question
No.
anymore because it sort of leads me into a dead end in my mind.
No, that's totally fine. That makes a lot of sense. I think it's quite cool to hear that like all the different sumo studios kind of have their own little culture, but obviously you're part of a bigger whole. Like you were saying, they like the people, and they know the sort of people they want to bring in and looking after them and stuff. But I suppose it must be nice to be able to say like you're building Sumo Leamington from scratch.
The approach with Sumo is to make sure that each studio has the autonomy and responsibility to operate itself as an individual business unit, because otherwise it's just very hard to scale, and really you don't get the best out of the people you have in each studio if you're passing down a template to each studio. So for us, the kind of people we're looking for are really those who are collaborative. Because we're working on mobile and we're working free to play, we need people who kind of understand that, and more, a lot of people are existing with free-to-play games. We don't need people specifically who've only done mobile. We don't need people who've got experience even. It's more about people's attitude and fit to what we want to try and build with the culture. And the culture is, going on from previous studios we've built, really just about being collaborative and open. We want people to be serious about their work and have fun doing their work, but really be focused and giving high quality output during our working day and making sure that we're really proud of what we're working on. And those things most people I suppose would trot those out, I suppose, but they are really important things, and if you're honestly trying to find people and have colleagues working with you who really have the same values and are there not just to do a job but to actually enjoy building wonderful content, that is a bit of a different vibe to people who kind of, got this job, I'll just turn up and do what I'm told. That's not what we're about. We talk about autonomy, mastery and purpose, and it is what our aim is for staff as much as possible is they have autonomy, there's trust, that they actually feel and have the ability to make their own decisions, but within a sort of collaborative framework. People are improving what they're doing, and improvement is another one of our values that's really important. So, if we're not learning and not growing in what we're doing, all of us, that's not the sort of studio we want to have. And purpose is another one where, if people don't understand what their purpose is and they're not trying to do things towards goals, that's fundamentally going to make people unhappy and not work well together. So that's what I roughly say about the culture we're trying to build.
Yeah, I think, like you were saying, with the games industry, more than probably a lot of other industries, it's very much passion industry, and that if you don't want to make the sort of games that you're making, or you don't want to get involved in that way and push innovations and have a look at all that new tech and stuff, then it is going to be a bit of a dead end and not going to fit in with the idea of the studio, because the studio is they're doing what they want to do, so if you can't really get on board, I suppose it's not the best place to be.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, what I say is, because we as a business do a lot, mostly work for hire, we do other stuff as well. The kind of people who we work with need to be prepared to do a good job for partners and clients on whatever they're working on, so it might not be the ideal genre or the ideal IP of their dreams, but really I truly believe in any project you can get a lot of joy and satisfaction out of doing the job well, and that's the kind of culture we foster here, and I suppose that's an important part. The other part is going back to sort of my historical roots, where people are passionate in the games industry, and you can chuck people in and they'll my first game that I worked on, working too many hours a day for too many months, just because it was so amazing. I was in the games industry and I was building a game, and I was lucky because that panned out and the game was successful. I had to go and lie down for 3 months after we finished the game. So going through that experience of crunch, another important thing for us is people need to be passionate and on the bus and willing to work on any project that we're doing proactively and professionally. But also for us to be professional, so to make sure that people are not working extra hours, we're being really diligent, and we've been really our output is high quality and high output during our core hours, and making sure that we're doing projects in a professional way. And that's really important to me, because I fundamentally believe, having seen various projects go late and being teleported into various projects in my roles, in previous history. If you build the team correctly and everyone has the right purpose and understands what their aims are and understands, what the output should be, I truly believe you can build great content in a professional setup without having to burn people out. And it's also, the kind of games that we like working on are games that will be existing for years. And it's just nice to have people come into work with energy and not sort of their energy disappear or over years working on a game, start to be jaded. So, this is an important thing for us.
Yeah, looking after your staff as well, like you were saying, that sort of crunch culture can get very burnout-y quite quick, can't it?
It's talked about a lot. Yeah,
what I was going to say is that actually one of the things that as an industry we're really lucky is that we talk about passion. Grads come in and they're really passionate about, they want to work in this industry. That's before they've even finished their degree, that's what they want to do. And, as an industry, I think in years gone, we've kind of driven that passion out of them a little bit with how they've been treated. And that's the opposite of what we want. And that's come back to giving them purpose, because if they've got purpose, not being told what to do, being told what the end goal is, and helping them and mentoring and making sure they've got the right people around them, that makes a big difference to them. And, that's going to help the industry as it grows.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with when you're looking at graduates and new people coming into the industry and they've got that enthusiasm, they've got that excitement kind of right off the bat. You don't want that to kind of peter off. You want to kind of drive that enthusiasm.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah. For us with the studio, we're obviously based in Leamington. Part of the reason for that is because there's just so many developers in the area, and it's always been my thought that it's great. The more developers we have in the area is just better for the industry, and it's better for the area, and long term, it makes it better as a community. I've never sort of treated other developers being in the area as a threat or something competitive. Our attitude is always within our team. If people enjoy working in our team, they'll be in our team. If people go and move to other studios, it's actually kind of nice that there's an ecosystem. Often people want to move to different studios for different reasons, and our attitude is, if it's the right fit here, that's great, let's not worry about what everyone else is doing. But it's now a really good area to come and work in, because there are so many choices and so many developers, and you have that sort of critical mass where there's a lot of collaboration where it's appropriate between different developers. A lot of the development studios speak to each other a lot, and that's a nice community. But the flip side of that is, in order to actually keep growing the industry within this area and within the UK, we need to be working with graduates and juniors. And going back to what I was saying earlier about my first experience coming into Codemasters, where we built a #1 game with mostly graduates, we truly believe that the future is in building teams with some experienced people, but mentoring and bringing on young people. And that's one of our key things that we want to get across with how we're building the studio, that we have a core of experienced people. We've got really good experience in mobile, free to play, as well as console historically, but with that sort of framework there, we're really looking for sort of young talented people coming through education or other backgrounds.
Yeah, that's excellent. And one of my questions was going to be
I've got on to answering some of your questions.
It's totally fine. As soon as we go along, it totally works for me. But it must be really good working in the area. I can imagine there's like a lot of meetups and game jams and other things going on in the area, because I think I read somewhere there's like 3,000 people in Leamington Spa that are in game studios, which is
10% of the games industry work in
10%.
That's
a
in Leamington.
huge amount.
This area, so it is a huge amount.
Yeah. It must be really cool having that kind of energy around, I suppose, because there's a lot of people who know your struggles, share your energy, you can go and have a natter too.
Yeah, and if you walk around Leamington, you can, because really the biggest industries now in this area, I would say, and this is me being biased, but obviously games. But then, automotive, and within the Midlands area, that's got a long history. Obviously, Jaguar Land Rover now. But essentially, you walk around Leamington, and you can see the Jaguar Land Rover people, and you can see the games people, and there's a lot of both.
Yeah.
There are sort of game jams and meetups and sort of informal and formal games industry clubs and stuff going on, because there's such a long heritage of games development in the area, and people do move around. People know each other, and there's a lot of networks there, so it's a really good area to sort of come into or be in, if you're working in the games industry.
Yeah.
And things. I think there's at least 2 board game cafes, or game cafes in Leamington. There's, I think, at least 2 escape rooms. Might even be more than that, just within Leamington, and that's sort of indicative of the demographic in the local area. And Leamington's a good town as well, because you have Warwick and Coventry universities. So there's a lot of students within the town, and I think that, as well as the games industry, kind of adds a bit of energy to it.
Yeah.
So Leamington Spa is this sort of Victorian spa town, and obviously it's not a thriving metropolis. If you want to go and be in a thriving metropolis, like London or somewhere like that, Leamington is not for you. But for a lot of people within the games industry, Leamington's a really nice place to live.
Yeah.
And I think, the way you can explain why is Leamington a good place, I can't really explain that, but the fact that, coming from Codemasters in the 80s to where we are now, and a lot of my ex-colleagues at Codemasters are sort of running separate companies that have formed in the area, people choose to stay here. So that's, that kind of just says it all, really.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And I think even like what you're saying about for young nerds, there's lots of stuff there with, but also as a family, if the schools are great, it's a nice place to, it's got nice parks, it's a nice place to visit. It's just it's a good place to be, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some people, somebody that we've hired recently who's coming back from London because he's got a young family now, and he actually used to work at Codemasters years ago and then was doing some other stuff. And that's explicitly, he's coming back to Leamington because he's got a young family. So that side of things is cool as well.
That's it. It definitely appeals to me. I'm not a London fan at all as a person.
Yeah.
I'm from the deepest, darkest countryside originally. So.
Yeah, and I think you have that. For some people, London works, and for other people, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
I was always not one of those London people or big city people either, and Leamington works very well for those types, shall we say.
I worked in London for 12 months, and just being on the tube, it's really depressing, really, really depressing. And just the fact that no one makes eye contact with you, and you can basically tell the people that aren't commuting on a daily basis because they're smiling. No commuter smiles.
But I love London. I think it's a great city, and I love visiting and spending time there. But I think,
to visit,
like you say, I think if you come from the sticks, it's just maybe we're just sort of brought up differently. I don't know.
No, I was saying this earlier. It's probably going to end up on all the podcasts. But at my last job, we had a Sheffield office and a London office, and I used to go down to the London office a lot because that's where most of the marketing team was based. Yeah. And the other one was based up in Sheffield. And the Sheffield office is like all open plan. Nobody's got a coloured off room, and everyone's so chatty because everyone's really northern. You go down to London office, and it's just silent. People are like slacking each other 3 feet away, and I'm like, you do know she's there, right? And they'd be like, everybody knows when you're down because you're just shouting and talking to everybody. I'm like, I think it's just a different attitude.
Yeah, I think it is. That's sort of an interesting point you raised, because in terms of office layout and just environment within the office, that's important for us as well. And the interesting thing about office layouts is you've got this whole everything needs to be open plan. And actually, that's great for some people. It's not good for other people at all. So, certain people and certain projects even need different setups. So that's something we focus on as well. Our default attitude, is this office at the moment is quite open plan, but actually we understand that, and it's a conundrum because there's some other sort of tech companies that have gone back to cubes for everyone. I don't think that's the answer either. But really, how we partition the office and how we ensure that people have quiet space to work and are able to focus, that's really important. And then on the flip side of it, making sure there is enough energy in the office, because you walk into some offices and it just sort of feels low, and it's like, how I guess describe it being in a tomb. Yeah. There's no energy there, and if you can have offices that are relatively quiet, it doesn't mean it needs to be noisy to have energy, but it's just making sure that you've. I'm not going to start talking about feng shui or anything like that, but. Making sure that you do have the right setup in the office just as a environment to make sure the energy's right.
I guess that must be a really good thing about starting from obviously a very small team and kind of building it to a bigger one, is that you can get a lot of feedback from the people who are working here, and you can see what works for everyone, sort of levels of collaboration and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think so. And we've seen it in the past where I've had an office and there's been sort of two main bits of the office. One side of the office had lots of energy. The other side of the office, went in and it's like, ooh, it's really flat in here. We tried moving the team where the energy was high into the other office where the energy was low, and just sort of switched the people. Yeah. And the energy was still low in that. Yeah. So, it was so literally strange. The layout of the office. It was a really sort of interesting illustration that the layout of the office it wasn't the people or the team, it was, the layout was affecting just the dynamic, which is really crazy to see.
Yeah.
Again, that's, I guess, the sort of hindsight and experience, you do sort of start to see what doesn't work and what does work. And I do think that's important when obviously you're setting up game studios and you're trying to get to a certain size, which we're ambitious at Sumo, and we envisage this studio to be 70 to 100 people.
Wow.
To kind of have seen what works and what doesn't work at those kind of scales and above before is kind of useful. So you can be confident, I hope, that when people are coming in, it's going to be a good environment to work in.
Yeah. what sort of things are you looking for when it comes to applications? If you want to do the recruitery part of the podcast
Absolutely,
do you know what sort of people you're looking for? What do you like to see in a CV? Like, that sort of thing.
I think a CV can't be too long because it can be really boring reading through it. So keeping it short, 2 pages max, I think is the golden rule, and some people still don't stick to that. And I like to see a cover letter. People don't do cover letters, but just something that makes you stand out from the other CVs, because we've been really fortunate because since we've put the original ad out for Leamington, we've had thousands of CVs.
Wow.
But they become really repetitive. Something that stands out and making it personal, I think, in your cover letter. Yeah, I like that one.
Yeah, cover letter's definitely important. On the CV itself, it doesn't need to be all sort of spangly and have bizarre fonts and be super arty. Even for artists, actually, they can just be sort of pretty simple and easy to read. It's mind-boggling to see the number of CVs which have got really quite bad typos in, or misspellings.
Yeah.
There's no excuse with the spell checker.
That's CV 101, isn't it? But then also, just not too much detail. But I am interested in seeing people's sort of path all the way through their lives, really, as they came through education to the current day. So just to sort of see that in a fairly concise form is useful. But the most important thing, you can kind of see that the applicant has applied to you and done their research and genuinely is applying because they know something about what you're doing and what Sumo as a business is doing. I think that's important. And then obviously show reels, examples of work. It's always important to see that, whatever your discipline is, just to show that you've created something within your specific discipline that we can actually look at. I think it's important.
Yeah. So what does your application process look like? I know you're talking a lot about sort of culture fit and people who are quite enthusiastic and things like that. How do you gauge that? Do you like Skype calls, or do you call people in as quickly as possible? Or?
But it kind of varies depending on the position. But what we try to do is do a 30-minute Skype call to start with, and that is just it's just a personality check at that point, really. And then for the programmers, they tend to do the programming test before that, so that at that point, all being well, we'll bring them into the studio. That's the really important bit, because when they're in the studio, we've 80% made our mind up at that point. So it's about making sure that not only we get to introduce as much of the team, because that's really important, because it's never just one person's decision about who comes in, but the team get to meet that person. And whoever's coming in as a candidate gets to have a really good experience about what we are as a team, and we always say, ask whatever questions you want. It's really informal. There's nothing that you can't ask, and it's normally Chris and I will see them at the end. Just reiterating and making sure that there's no questions unanswered, and making sure that if they walk out the room and they still think, I forgot to ask that one question, that they can contact someone directly in the studio as well, not going through the recruiters as well. So just making sure that it's a really quick answer back to them, but giving it the personal touch from our perspective as well, because a lot of these candidates, they can go anywhere right now. There's a lot of demand. We just need to stand out.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a lot about selling the studio to the candidate as well, and the projects to the candidates, making sure they're going to be a right fit, because there's no point in them coming in and thinking it's going to be X and it turns out being Y.
It is tricky. With Sumo's working on such a lot of exciting projects, and there's a lot of variety. And that's an appealing thing with Sumo, where there are so many different projects going on, and we do move people and have people help out between the studios. There's opportunity to go and work on lots of different things. But the problem is we can't talk about what the projects are pretty much all the time, because we're very careful about that. It's very important to us that we don't break the trust and the confidentiality of whatever client that we're working with. So when, in terms of recruitment, it does kind of almost make it hard, because we're doing some really cool stuff that we can't tell people about. So it's just like, just come in, and we can't share that stuff until a very late phase in the process. So that is definitely a challenge for us.
Yeah.
I guess if this is a podcast and it were to go on there, I just have to promise that we are doing some really cool stuff.
No, I love it. I promise you, it's really cool. You totally get it, because obviously you've got clients to work for, and you can't be breaking trusts and NDAs, etc. It makes perfect sense. You are definitely not the only studio. That's the same issue.
Of course.
But as long as you can promise it's cool, they can make the decision very quickly if you're wrong.
That's it.
So you specialise in making mobile games. What do you think is the main challenge of making mobile games opposed to PC or console?
I think it's not about that divide between the platforms. It's the kind of game you're making, and it's more, is it free to play games? Is it single player? Is it multiplayer? Does it have large communities? What's the commercial model? Is it streamed or pay to download or free to play? And really, we're focused on, at the moment, free to play service-based games. And the requirements of that is just very different from a console game, which maybe will have some DLC, but then that's kind of it. And it's just a very different design process and thought process in how you build those kind of games.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's mobile specific. Of course, there's the things like the form factor, attention spans, the length of time in a session, that kind of stuff is different between console and mobile, broadly speaking. But even that's shifting. If you look at some of the experiences that are on mobile doing very well now, it's catering to everyone. Everyone's obviously got a smartphone. Just to say, we're designing mobile games, therefore X, doesn't mean anything. It's really what your audience is. Going from hyper casual, which really isn't our thing, to sort of more mid-core, but then traditional gamers playing more and more on mobile as well. People who wouldn't look at a mobile device to play a game seriously on a few years ago, that's changing as well. Yeah. And then you've got the category where really people aren't gamers, but they, everyone plays games, right? Everyone plays games at school, in the playground, but lots of people are not gamers in terms of self-identifying as being gamers, but they are playing a lot of games on the phone. So it's a really vague answer, but essentially you just really need to be very specifically looking at who the community of people that you're building the game for are, and what kind of experience that they need.
Yeah.
Rather than, it's mobile, therefore I'm going to assume X, Y, and Z. There's obviously loads of stuff that you just need to nail before you even sort of come to the party, which is fast load times, looking at what the download speed is, making sure that you've got performance if you're a multiplayer game, the infrastructure's there on the back end to actually support these games. So there's a lot of technically difficult things that you need to do to run essentially what seems like quite a simple game on a mobile device. There's lots of games that are big games with a lot of server infrastructure, and the same could be true of a console game or a PC game. As a mobile game, there's quite a lot of demanding technology there as well.
With the introduction, I suppose, of Stadia and cloud gaming especially, mobile gaming's only going to get better and better by the looks of it.
Yes.
I mean, look how much has grown in the last 5 years. It's gone from being, those little, like you say, the hyper casuals were basically all that was there.
Yeah.
And now it's kind of turned around and you can play Fortnite, COD, etc. on your phone.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time. As a market, mobile is kind of mature now, and that's not just in the West. Arguably more mature in territories like Japan and China. And the kind of experiences that are on mobile, it's really interesting. It's very interesting to see what's happening with streaming. Obviously streaming's been around for a long time, but there's lots of good use cases for it, and lots of quite interesting platforms out there now sort of showing up, and some businesses that are very successful in different categories with just pure streaming, not even before you have Stadia coming in. And then with things like Apple Arcades and then Google's subscription service coming out, it's a very interesting time.
It must be really interesting
to be a game developer. I think that's always true. It's always been true since I come into the industry. But there is a lot of stuff going on, and it's quite hard to see, exactly where mobile will be in 2, 3, 4 years. But we know there's going to be lots of cool stuff, so that's great.
It's got to be exciting for a mobile studio though, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's our job for ourselves, be developing things, but also with clients and partners, be doing great stuff on mobile, and there's so many things to be doing, an exciting time for us.
Yeah, it must be cool being able to work with clients and partners as well. You can see a lot of studios kind of looking at messing with the free-to-play model, how they look at monetising that, how they actually diversify the revenue streams, for a boring turn of phrase. But it must be really interesting speaking to clients about those sort of projects, and they're looking at maybe their first go into the mobile industry and seeing what that kind of looks like, and being able to talk to them about that.
It is very
this
interesting.
This is purely for my personal thing, by the way. This is not a question I wrote
down. It is very interesting because you have, obviously free to play is still the main money earner in terms of volume, and the value of that is massive on mobile primarily, but also other platforms too. It's very biased towards not that many payers as well. The whole free-to-play model is very different to the traditional model. But yet you can see lots of people, like you say, Mario Kart, and COD are very interesting examples of, big franchises which are definitely working on mobile and actually are very much their DNA, and that those games is very much the console game with some stuff done to work on mobile. This is not a Fallout Shelter type example. It's like these big games. I guess maybe a little bit with Fortnite sort of happening. It's opened the gates for people to be trying that again. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
But yeah, with the commercial model to actually get that to work as well, anybody can sort of look through the example with Nintendo's Mario Run. They've obviously had a lot of success with other mobile titles and tried different things. But it still seems that, to really be commercially successful on mobile at a certain level, you're still in free-to-play land.
Yeah, I don't know if that's likely to change with the subscription models coming in or anything like that, but it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, with the subscription model, if you're designing a game for Apple Arcade, that's very different to how you should be thinking about it for a free-to-play game. Yeah. But then at the same time, there are certain requirements that you need to be thinking about because, again, if games are replayable infinitely and people can exist with them as hobbies for years, those are the kind of games that are going to be popular on streaming platforms. You're not really looking for, one of the issues with, I know Apple Arcade isn't a streaming platform, but one of the issues with streaming platforms is the spikes and actually providing the infrastructure to cope with those spikes. With a subscription model or streaming, it's more interesting, I think, to have games where you just have a community that's building over time and you're operating these games for a long time. And if I've got a subscription and I enjoy playing this game as part of a portfolio and keep coming back to it, I think that's interesting. And the interesting thing there is it's very different from obviously Netflix kind of model, because games is just fundamentally different from an experience of watching a box set or anything like that. And that's a challenge to see how these business models all fit together over time. It's cool because it's interesting. There's lots of stuff going on. Yeah,
there's lots of variety and loads of different things to do, especially in mobile at the moment. I mean, you can't believe how much power people have got on their phones and their pockets, and like using that to its best ability. Creating games for clients must be a pretty good challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I think with the power on the devices now, a few years ago you were limited in what you were doing, whereas actually that's not such an issue anymore. You obviously need to do things well, but in terms of the fidelity and the quality you can get, if you obviously make the right investment and build things in the right way, that's not really a thing so much on mobile. It's just more about the experience that you're giving and that sort of detailed game design, the systems design, how you're making sure that players are playing together well over a period of time. So yeah, it's interesting. Is there anything else you're curious about?
I'm curious about everything. This is my problem. For someone joining the studio, what would your one bit of advice or an insider tip be to give them, either about the studio or the area, something like that you'd tell them?
Right now, for Sumo Leamington, we want people who are enthusiastic about helping us start up a big studio. So the tip is, if you're up for coming in and seeing opportunity and being collaborative, if you're that kind of person who's interested in that sort of environment, it's a very good time to speak to us.
Cool.
That'd be my answer. Do you have one?
Yeah, well, that's a pretty good answer, actually. No matter how many years of experience you've got as well, don't let that put you off applying, because this is a good opportunity, as Chris says, as we're growing. It's a good opportunity to come and grow with us. So it's just as good for us as it will be for them.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I would say is we do get a lot of applications, and we do very much, welcome graduates and juniors. People shouldn't be put off by applying if they feel they don't have a level of experience. That is important. On the flip side, we are quite picky, so if you're talking about tips for writing to us and actually explaining why you've been inspired to apply, those kind of things are very important as well.
Yeah, I suppose that goes back to what you're saying with the cover letter as well, when they're actually putting something together that, make it specific to you guys. Last question, and you can be as vague as you want because I realise you can't talk about any of the projects, but what does the future look like for Sumo Leamington?
Yeah, we can't talk about the project that we're working on at the moment or projects that we have, but at the same time I think it's really exciting what we're working on, and if you were to do a straw poll and just sort of walk around the people in the office there, the project that we're working on is quite collaborative, so it's really nice project in that sense. It's with a partner that we know well, and it's not boring at all. It's trying some really sort of quite new things. Could be a wonderful thing when it comes out. So that's quite exciting in terms of what we're working on right now, and then some other stuff coming down the pipe is also super exciting. And the ethos, and the strategy of the studio has always been aim to run multiple projects rather than be sort of one big mega project. I think that's just good from being able to do work for hire in general, to be able to actually service a few different things, but also in how we build the studio and form the teams, to have teams that genuinely are kind of autonomous rather than, one set of management and then just lots of people told what to do. To actually have a few teams which are their own teams, able to scale up and scale down, is important.
Yeah, I think, and you're right, because even if you go, like I was saying, if you go out and speak to those guys, certainly for the engineers, we've definitely given them a technical challenge that they're scratching their head over, but
yeah, they're loving it.
They are loving it. And our TD was saying that he's not been sleeping at night. And we're like, what's up? But he's not sleeping. He wasn't sleeping because he's really excited about the project and that's what was keeping him up more. The fact that he's got all these things that are going off in his head, and that's. Like, well, I don't know how we can't really do anything about that. Sorry about that. But yeah, they are really they're enjoying it, and that's great to see them all doing that. But even just talking about the things that, like all the things that we have planned for the studio, the projects aside, and what we believe is going to make us a great studio, I think that's probably what makes it even more exciting.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. I think everybody loves to be challenged, don't they? Especially in this sort of industry, and giving them something to scratch their heads over and work out together is probably a really good sign.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to really match the culture we're building against the projects we're working on as well. There's no point, having that kind of culture and then just working on stuff where, we're not challenging ourselves or trying to actually do things that are really going to be pushing things in the market. So,
is that one of the things you're going to be looking at when you're taking on projects? Sort of the level of challenge you think it will bring to the team?
Yes, is the short answer.
Cool.
I mean, my main position is I want to be working on stuff that's interesting and pushing things a little bit. I don't want to just be sort of trotting out, something that is kind of turning the handle. I want to be working on things that that are inspiring, and I've been quite lucky in my career, but generally I think my attitude is I want to be working on stuff and want all of us to be working on things that delight people when they come out and exist and are successful in the market, are materially interesting things to play and have as experiences. So that is generally our attitude. Obviously, within what we do, we're also very happy just to support teams on anything they're doing, where it's needed.
Thank you for listening to the Aardvark Swift podcast. This episode was recorded on site at Sumo Leamington and was hosted by Abby Dickinson. It was produced and edited by me, James Bowers. If you have any comments or suggestions for the podcast, or if you'd like to feature on a future episode, please email james.b@aswift.com. Special thanks go to Harinder Sangha and Chris Southall for spending time with us. If you're looking to break into video games or make a transition to a new role, you can visit the Aardvark Swift website at aswift.com. We have hundreds of industry vacancies both at home and abroad, with a large percentage offering remote hiring and remote working during the COVID-19 situation. So there's nothing stopping you from getting your dream role. Be sure to also follow us across social media for the latest news and exciting vacancies. You can follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn and Facebook at Aardvark Swift, and we also have a behind the scenes Instagram account by the team at Life at Aardvark. The music in this episode is from Incomputech by Kevin MacLeod. To learn more, please visit incomputech.com.